The opinions expressed by Peter Wexler, Robert Quitner, Kyle Plotkin, Michael Hart, Nicholas Hamner, and guests on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this network. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Any strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it is suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subjects covered. Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management LLC, aka BCM, a registered investment advisor. BCM and Franklin Retirement Solutions are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BCM but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents.
Welcome to another episode of Solving the Retirement Puzzle. I'm Nick Hamner, your host, and joining me as they have every week are Michael Hart and Kyle Plotkin. Guys, I'm going to dive in right from the start with an important question. What is the leading sports injury for adults over 60?
I'm gonna go hernia.
I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. What is the most dangerous sport for adults over 60? Where do the majority of accidents happen?
Pickleball?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say pickleball. It's all the rage.
Bicycling.
Hmm.
And I bring this up because it is important to stay active as you get older, and also because a youth sports organization my family is involved with, they've traditionally done a powder puff football game, where the moms play instead of the kids. This year they've changed it. This year the first half is the moms, the second half is the dads.
Oh, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, the number of guys in their late 30s, early 40s that are going to get out there like they're still 15, 16, 17. I cannot imagine the number of knee injuries that are going to come out of this.
Is this flag football?
Yeah, it's flag football, but I think we're all fooling ourselves if we think the dads aren't going to go in for hits.
I was just gonna say.
Like somebody's getting clotheslined. A pass over the middle, some linebacker whose job, some former linebacker in high school whose job prospects really haven't gone where they thought they would. He's got a lot of pent-up anger.
I scored 4 touchdowns in one game.
That whatever receiver comes over the middle against that guy is getting taken out. Coach would have put me in state, we'd have won.
Back in high school, yeah.
Throw that football clean over the mountains. But no, so staying fit is important. Staying active is important. The Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion recommends those 60 and over get at least 150 minutes of exercise a week. That's 5 days of exercise. They recommend 2 days of muscle building and at least 1 day of working on your balance as you age. And in terms of exercise, that's any activity that's going to get your heart rate up, because sweat is good. If it makes you sweat, that counts as exercise. Unless you're just so out of shape that peeling an orange makes you sweat. In that case, maybe swing back to the doctor and get a physical before you get started. But we talked about bicycling. Bicycling is the most common cause of sports injuries for those 60 and up.
What is the most common bicycling injury?
Just results of a fall, really, because your vision's not what it once was. It's a lot of, it's not a repetitive sports injury.
Didn't the president fall off his bike?
Couple presidents ago, yeah.
I thought the current president fell off his bike.
I don't think so. I mean, probably.
He wasn't injured, but I think he fell.
I mean, I can fall looking at a bike, but y'all mentioned pickleball. 85% of all pickleball injuries occur in those 60 and older, primarily from slipping, tripping, diving, or falling.
85% of those playing pickleball are probably 60
not
older.
really. That's become like for insufferable Gen Y, Gen Z. That insufferable group, a lot of them are picking up pickleball.
I'm trying to. So what are you trying to say?
I mean, it's an old wiffle ball and it's a wooden paddle that somehow costs $55. So why wouldn't you?
It's like glorified table
pong.
tennis, really.
Yeah.
Ping pong.
I think we should just stick to golf.
Two of us, maybe.
Sorry, Mike. Listen, backyards and regulation is going to become a new stat, and I will make it happen. Um, a lot of other sports are contributing to a specific injury in the triangular fibrocartilage complex. That's your wrist.
I knew that.
Can develop your wrist click. That's golf, basketball, and another sport popular with the 60-plus set,
Tennis?
Badminton.
kickboxing.
What?
Most commonly resulting from golf, basketball, or kickboxing. And unfortunate news, if you are 60 and over and you dislocate your shoulder for any reason, you have an 85% chance of that turning into a rotator cuff. That's going to be a fun tear, tearing up your rotator cuff. So how do you avoid all this? Because it's important to stay active. You got to stay active. As you age, you lose muscle mass 30% by the time you're 60. Got to stay active, keep going. So they say to avoid injury, you need to actually warm up. Don't just kind of do a couple of leg kicks and call that a warm up. Do some stretches, get your body temp up in a controlled fashion. Then when you're done, actually cool down. Don't just immediately go sit in the car and go home. And the big one, wear the protective gear that you're supposed to. Which is hard because have you ever seen, bicycling is the number one cause of injury. Have you ever seen a bike helmet that looks good? Have you ever seen a bike helmet that improves your appearance?
Yeah, there's the one that kids wear that's got like the mohawk on top of
that
it.
is cool, but
I'd wear it.
the bike helmets, you look like you're wearing a styrofoam tray on your head.
But you are.
Yeah, I mean, all it is, and you have to actually pay the money to get a proper helmet. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos online. We can't really link to them this way, but there's a guy online that's testing the different helmets at different price points, and he'll line up a $20 bike helmet, he'll line up a $50 bike helmet, he'll line up a $200 bike helmet, and just drop a sledgehammer from 6 feet up.
I thought he was gonna fall off the bike himself and see how it goes in each of the helmets.
That's commitment, but not really. And he'll do the same for hard hats. He'll do the same for motorcycle helmets, and you really do get what you pay for. That's crazy. But yeah, you got to wear it. You got to get active, and you got to keep yourself protected. And that is all I have for the week. But I will report back in when the flag football game actually happens, and we see who ends up in traction.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'll come visit you at the hospital.
Oh, I'm absolutely doing it. I mean, it's important to know your limits, but I'm still gonna do it.
Over under on ambulance calls during that game.
At least 6.
I was gonna set the over under at 2.5.
You're going to have the one quarterback throw his arm out because, of course, you're going to.
Is it a permanent QB?
Typically, with the flag teams, you're going to have one guy that designates himself as the QB and the play designer, and he's not giving that up because he's the only one committed enough to actually do it.
Well, he was the quarterback 40 years ago in high school, probably.
Then you're going to have a couple of guys that really should be linemen, but since you don't have linemen in flag football, they're going to be the running backs and the guys who take 2 steps out and turn around, and that's their pass route. That's great.
The decoys.
They're not decoying anybody. I mean, they're really kind of they're the kind of guys Barry Sanders would hide behind back in his prime. But they're not running.
Good game for Alabama this weekend.
You asked me if I thought they would cover.
I did.
But when you play a directional school, I mean, that'd be like if we had somehow allowed them to score, that would have been like losing to Boston College.
Is that a Notre Dame joke?
No, that's a Florida State joke.
Okay.
They really should have been in the playoffs last year because they haven't won a game this year.
Well, you know what? Better an oops than a what if.
Maybe.
Do you play a real team next week?
No, we play South Florida. For anybody wondering, we're talking about Alabama football. I have 2 degrees from Alabama, so a little bit of a football fan. They were terrible the entire time I was down there. But nonetheless, so with that wonderful segue, if you have any questions about retirement, because staying physically active is a part of retirement, as is watching college football. I mean, that's a part of everyday life anyway. If you have any questions, comments about your retirement plan and staying active while retired, give us a call at 215-657-9200 or shoot us an email at info@franklinrs.com. Mike, we're going to jump over to you this time. What you got now?
So I actually have a stat bank from the Financial Planning Association, Journal of Financial Planning. I'm going to keep it light this week.
Is it the Journal of Financial Planning Association or is it the Financial Planning Association and Journal?
The
The Department of Redundancy
the
Department.
FPA, the Financial Planning Association, puts out a once a month, magazine called the Journal of Financial Planning.
So it's journaled. It has like edition numbers and everything. Are they Roman numeraled?
I couldn't tell you because I just signed up for it last week. So, but this is from the September issue, which obviously just came out the other day. So, 68% of American millennials and Gen Z have or expect to receive an inheritance. 57% of American millennials and Gen Z who believe windfalls will precipitate wealth inequality. So people inheriting money from their parents. If your parents have money, then you'll have money.
So we're talking about the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 76% of that same group plan to put their inheritance towards savings or investments. 40% want to put their inheritance towards paying off debt.
Student loans.
Mm-hmm. 22% want to put their inheritance towards traveling.
Mm-hmm.
51% of Americans 61 to 65 years old have already retired. So half of that group from 61 to 65, more than half, are already retired.
Now, does it go into whether that was they took an early retirement package from work, whether they wanted to retire, or they just can no longer work because they're of obligations, or did they choose to retire?
Just strictly based on age.
Okay.
Yeah. Americans 61 to 65 who retired due to disability or inability to work, 43%.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. And then Americans 61 to 65 who provide financial assistance to an adult family member, 28%. And then two last stats. Currently, the monthly median cost for a private room at a nursing home is $9,733.
That's low, actually.
The
for this
projected
area.
cost in 2050 will be $21,620.
So what I'm hearing is on the left side of that chart were all the kids who expected to receive an inheritance and what they were planning to do with the money. On the right were all the reasons why they will not be getting that money at all. Because I have a counter. So how many were planning to do something worthwhile with whatever they plan to inherit? What was it? 78% were planning to reinvest their inheritance?
76. Yeah,
76%. Do you know the average length of time between a person inheriting money and a person buying a new car?
1 week.
I would imagine it's an incredibly short period of
19
time.
days.
Yep.
And I know there's I know there's a report somewhere because we've talked about it before in our newsletter, which you can sign up for on franklinrs.com. Just scroll down, you'll see sign up for our newsletter. We'd love to have you sign up. We've talked about this study before that wealth typically does not survive the third generation. So the first generation builds the wealth, second generation inherits the wealth, but they still have some recognition for what it took to gain that wealth. Third generation only knows the money, only knows the lifestyle that comes from having that money, and they squander it.
It's a version of that saying, bad times create good people create good times create, bad people or soft people.
Yeah, there's like historical theories out there as well about like what one generation leads to what happens in the next generation and what happens in the next. That's why things cycle.
Mm-hmm. And don't fight the cycle. But no, there's a couple of important things to touch on there. So if you do plan on leaving money to your kids, having some sort of legacy plan in place so they can't just immediately squander it is always a huge thing. But then there's also the elder planning, estate planning portion of it, where with those nursing home costs, you better have some kind of plan in place because very few people have the private resources to fully pay what a nursing home will cost. Plus, they will come after your money.
You should have that plan in place early
You should.
Mhm.
as well.
It's one of
'Cause
those.
the longer you wait, the less there is that you can do, and the higher chance that you're not going to be able to get around paying all of your assets to cover that.
And if your plan is no, I'll declare bankruptcy and let Medicare take care of it. That doesn't work. Medicare doesn't cover. Medicaid will. It won't be a nice place, and Medicaid is going to require you to liquidate all your assets prior to applying, which really puts the surviving spouse in a tough spot.
Oh, it does. And another thing that I was going to mention there is, a lot of people just, well, I don't want to ever be put in that situation. I'm just going to poison my coffee.
And
or
usually
some other.
you're not brave enough to do that, and by the time it's time for you to go to a place like that, you're in no position to change.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. This happened with my grandmother, and it's common because I hear it from clients all the time, is that you're living independently, you're not in the best of health, but you're fine. One thing happens, you have a fall, or there's an illness, or a sickness, or an injury, or something, and you end up in the hospital, and the hospital tells you you cannot go back home. You must go into a facility. Well, at that point, it's too late. You're not able to, poison your coffee or whatever your dumb plan was
Mm-hmm.
to not get to that point. And all of a sudden, you never see your house again.
Right.
And then it's on your kids or whoever else is taking care of you at that point to deal with. So yeah, I mean, it is a serious issue, and that is oftentimes what I hear from clients or from real people is, yeah, I'll just take care of it. Well, no, because before you get to take care of it, reality is going to hit you in the face.
Right. It happens to you before you happen to it.
Yep.
And then the third, so we talked about having some kind of legacy plan in place so that your wealth does survive. We talked about estate planning, but also the amount of folks retiring before they hit, I think the number was 65, but so that really includes, what was that number?
61.
61 to 65, 51%.
So more than half the population is forced to retire before they hit full retirement age for Social Security, but also before they hit the age where Medicare covers their health care. So we've talked about having, solving your healthcare situation and avoiding that healthcare hole. We've talked about that before, but that just again reiterates you need to have some sort of plan in place for your healthcare because while you might plan to work until you're in your 70s, you're more than likely going to end up retiring well before you're ready to. And what would that look like? What's your day-to-day life going to look like if you're forced to retire before Social Security kicks in, before you're able to have Medicare? What are your costs going to look like? What is life going to look like? And that is why it's really important to have a all-encompassing plan that looks at what kind of legacy you want to leave, that looks at your likelihood of ending up in a long-term care facility where costs will be high, and what happens if you're forced to retire early. That all-around 360 look at everything kind of view. You got to have that. How do you get that? Well, how you get that is working with someone who can see every angle if you can't, or if you can't be bothered to. And that's what we're here for. So if you have a question or a comment, if you want to look at what your life would look like if you were forced to retire early, or if you were forced to go into a long-term care facility, that's what we're here for. Give us a call, 215-657-9200, or reach out to us via email, info@franklinrs.com. Kyle, we'll end with you. What you got this week?
So I have the stock market this week and the general economy. So of course we are recording this on September the 3rd.
Yep, September 3rd, Tuesday.
Okay. So historically, the month of September has been the most volatile, or the really the worst month of the year in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
kind of go back to what we talked about a while ago. Sell in May, go away, come back in October. That's the reason why it's October and not September. This year in particular could carry some additional volatility or some additional risks. Not only do we have the election happening, with the first debate coming up next week on the 10th,
That's right.
where who knows what's going to happen there. We also have the interest rate environment, where the interest rates have been as high as they've been in a long time for quite a while now. Everybody's expecting the Fed to drop their rates, probably a quarter point on the 18th of September after they meet. Now, could that get thrown off? It could. It could. There's a jobs report coming out this Friday, which has gotten it's got a lot of attention pointed at it, because that's certainly going to impact what the Fed decides to do and how the economy looks going forward. And essentially, it's a big month. It's a big couple of weeks. Things could go either way. I mean, if the jobs report is bad, things continue to keep looking like they're slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
The Fed could go more than a quarter point. That would surprise the markets. If the jobs report is very good, things don't slow down. Maybe the Fed continues to wait. I don't think they're going to, but it's always a possibility until it happens and is done. The other thing too, the markets are pricing in, according to this article. This is from Yahoo Finance today. That says the market's right now currently pricing in 4 rate cuts between now and the end of the year. I spoke with a rep from one of the big mutual fund companies last week. They are expecting 3 rate cuts, so that's a little bit different from what this article is claiming. There's probably a diversity of opinion across that. If you were to ask 100 people that are in the know, you'd probably get a bunch of different answers there.
Well, and I was going to say, at the start of the year, what was the projected number of rate cuts?
Oh, it was at least half a dozen, wasn't it?
I think it was 9.
Yeah, I was going to say 9 or 10.
Yeah, and then halfway through the year, it was maybe 1.
Right.
And now they're talking 3 or 4. So who knows? These things are always changing. They certainly have an impact on the market. Another thing as well is right now the market is being driven by a few of these huge mega cap tech stocks, really. Nvidia, Amazon, Microsoft, the usual suspects. If one of those stumbles, it could throw the whole thing off.
Yeah, and Nvidia had, an interesting situation last week where they beat estimates, but, the stock still went down. So.
Good news is bad news. Yeah.
They didn't beat it by enough.
They didn't beat it by enough, which again doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They beat the estimates, so you would think that it goes up. But again, nothing in the market really makes sense. I mean, if we looked back to last year, Mike, and we've talked about this a lot, is beginning of last year, it was pretty much consensus across the board, no matter who you asked or who you read. The market was going to have a terrible first half, and probably a half decent second half. Well, what happened was the exact opposite.
Yep.
So nobody really knows when it comes to the market and what's going to happen. So again, that's kind of where we are. Is you can predict as best as you want to and use historical data and all that stuff. Yeah. Until it actually happens and it's there in black and white, it's all just speculation. So again, big picture, yeah, could September be a rough month in the market? It probably looks like it's going to be. Is that a bad thing in the end? Who knows? Could be a good thing. You just never know. So when you're assessing your portfolio or what you have in the market, I mean the main question is how much are you able to lose?
Well, the benefit of being this close to retirement is that you're investing for the long term. You've been invested for the long term. You're not worried so much about the day-to-day fluctuations because you are a long-term investor.
Yeah, and the younger you are, the more you're really able to do that. The closer you get to retirement, the less risk generally, not always, but generally you're able to take. So that becomes a more important issue as you get older. I mean, somebody who's we're all in our early to mid 40s. For us, it's a lot more. We can take a lot more of that risk generally because we've got a lot of time to recover from a loss. So if
Yeah.
we wanted to buy all Nvidia stock, not that I'm saying you do that, I certainly haven't, but if you wanted to do that, it's again probably a much better idea to do that at 45 than it would be to do that at 70.
Yeah, and that touches on a good point, Kyle. A lot of advisors will bring you in and talk to you about risk and maybe give you a risk profile questionnaire to try to get an idea of how comfortable you are with the ups and downs of the market. But one thing that we talk about here that not everybody talks about is not just your risk tolerance, but your risk capacity. So maybe you are okay with the ups and downs of, an all stock portfolio, but maybe you don't have the time
Right.
to recover in the event of a huge downturn. So it's not always just about, again, how comfortable are you with the risk, which is the risk tolerance, but the risk capacity, which is do you have if something, if the
Does your
market should take a
portfolio
sharp
physically
downturn,
have the capacity to
yeah,
tolerate
do
that?
you have the time and the stomach to see it through to where you can, get back to where you were if you take a big downturn? Because, I mean, we've talked about this before. If you lose 50% of your portfolio, making 50% won't bring you back to where you were. You need to make 100% to get back to even.
And it's always, I think percentages are easier to swallow than the real numbers. It's easy to sit there and say, yeah, I'd be fine if I lost 10%. I've got time to make it back. But when that 10% is
$100,000.
more than you paid for your first 5 cars or more than you paid for your first house, it sits a little different when you see the real dollars behind it.
And that's another reason why usually it makes sense to talk to a professional, right?
Not only talking to a professional, but talking to a professional who's looking at your entire picture and who understands you. Not looks at your portfolio and says, this works, this doesn't, but looks at you and says, this would work for you. This is what's in your best interest.
One of the standard things, and we've talked about the money map before. It's kind of one of the main tools that we use, and we keep one of these for every client. We have all of their different accounts, whether we manage them or not, and we try to keep them as updated as we can. And then it breaks down by, is it a risk account, a non-risk account, how much is on either side of that ledger.
A lot of good lessons. Hope you learned something today. We will be back again next week. Thank you so much for joining us on Solving the Retirement Puzzle.